just a little bit. So we're going to talk about faith. And I just want to ask you a question. What is it, really? Like when you think about faith, it's probably a familiar word. Maybe you didn't grow up in church, but you're kind of like, oh, I know what this is all about. I've kind of heard it. Like, what is it really? Like if you were having a conversation with somebody who has no basis, like no background, like I've heard that word, but I don't know anything about it. What would you say? What would be the kinds of things that you would share with that individual? I think often we think of faith as maybe like beliefs. Like we could almost see it on a sheet of paper. Here's what I believe. These are the ideas that I agree with. And we've got this kind of mental association with some key thoughts or principles. Now, maybe that's not you. I bet majority of us have thought of that. That's kind of what I think of when I think of faith or belief. I think of a set of beliefs. But maybe you're more in the, like, I've heard this term before, blind faith. Like believing something maybe with lack of evidence. You're believing something that I don't know that I can prove, but I believe it to be true. And a lot of times what comes with this is the opposite of doubt, right? Faith versus doubt. And that's kind of how we might think of it. Faith has on one side, doubts on the other. And so it's believing something and not doubting. But maybe for you, it's more like wishful thinking, like I have faith something's going to happen. I believe it. I'm hopeful. I'm choosing to believe that something is going to come to pass. And a lot of times that's a bit of like a passive kind of thing, like we're waiting for something. In all of these things, there's a measure of truth. Like there's some basis for us to arrive at that description or understanding of faith. But you probably can guess, like, yeah, but none of that quite does it, right? Like none of these really get at what faith truly is. I want to suggest to you that underneath all of those, and there might be some others that we could think of, there's a particular perspective assumed about what faith is. It assumes that it's a thing. It's like a static object that we could take hold of, right? Like, here it is. Here's faith. And we can have it or we cannot have it. It's either there or it's not. I want to suggest to you that faith is not that simple. It's not that just right here, like I can hold on to it and I have it or I don't. I want to suggest to you that faith is way more complicated, complex, dynamic than that. Can I give you just a few examples that we see in the Bible of some of these nuances of faith, these different ways that faith might manifest? These are all statements that you find in the Bible or paraphrases. So the first one, this is a man who says this to Jesus when he wants Jesus to heal him. And here's what he says, I believe, help my unbelief. Have you heard that one before? It's like, I believe, but help my unbelief. Those two things are put alongside one another. Or the next one, these are words of Jesus summarized. He doesn't literally say it in these words, but this is what he says. The faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. Powerful and profound. And then speaking to Peter, he invites Peter to come out of a boat and walk on water just like he's doing. And then he starts to slip and drown. And then he says to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Seems like that faith-doubt dynamic is in play there. What do we do with all of these statements? Because it doesn't feel like, to me personally, that there's just one little thing about what faith is in all of these statements. I mean, we look at them and it's like, so what is this thing? That's why we're doing this series. We're going to be looking at the life of Abraham. And you're like, well, wait a minute, aren't we talking about faith? In the Bible, Abraham is propped up as a hero of faith, maybe even the hero of faith. He is shown as the one who's like, he does faith right. Like, he's the one that we should look to learn about what faith looks like. And so we're going to look at the story of Abraham. But to avoid falling into the overly simple definition, do you know the story of Abraham? Do you know how it goes? Abraham's story is one of faith and one of failure. Over and over again, we see him demonstrate trust and faith. And over again, we see him not trust, not show faith. See, in the book of Hebrews, we get this picture, and he's propped up as this example. And so here's what the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, says in a couple of different places about Abraham. And it's looking at these different characters in the Old Testament, but Abraham gets a lot of wordage in this section. So in verse 8, here's what it says. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. And that's, by the way, the story we're going to look at today. We're going to see this play out. Well, then jump down a few verses later, and here's kind of the end of his story and what the author says in verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." If you know this story, and if you don't, then here's the person that is going to carry on the promise that God gave him, and now God's saying, oh yeah, why don't you go ahead and sacrifice him? That should bother us on all kinds of levels. But the point here is to say, like, he demonstrated radical faith even against the promise itself. And so what we're going to see is this progression of faith. But here's the one thing that I want to highlight. Like, maybe no other place gets it just in this one sentence we find in the middle of the story. Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. This is described of Abraham. Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Faith is not a simple thing. Where a statement like that, opens up a whole new perspective on what faith actually is. But as I said earlier, Abraham, he's propped up as a hero of faith, and yet over and over and over again, he fails. So how do we get to the conclusion of what Hebrews says? Paul picks this up later too and highlights, like, Abraham's a guy we should learn from. How is that true? That's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to follow Abraham's life and see, what do we learn about faith? About its complexity, about its depth, about this thing that we sometimes think we know what it is, but we'll find that it's actually way better than we imagine. And so we're going to walk through and we're going to see these different moments, these different episodes in Abraham's life, and allow us to understand a different facet of faith. If you take the image of a diamond, you hold it and you can see how the light comes through and refracts and how beautiful it is. Well, if you turn a little bit, it looks just that much more different. You see, a different angle inside of the gem, how it plays on the light, and the beauty that you had in one instance now shifts and it's even more beautiful. That's exactly what we're going to do with the concept of faith. We're going to look at these different facets of what faith is, how it works, and how we can therefore carry out our own faith in our lives today. So to begin, we're going to begin with Abraham's story. And we're going to go to Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to look at the first 9 verses, and we're going to see what this faith thing is all about. Now, while we're talking about faith, I'm going to do one secondary thing kind of through this series as we go. It's like we're going to explore faith, but I'm going to highlight how we can read the Bible well. There's going to be some subtleties, some things that maybe if we just kind of read through, we might miss. I hope that this is also an exercise where we can learn how do we pay attention to the ways that the Bible is operating, what it's trying to teach us and show us in the subtleties. And how do we see these things play out in Abraham's story? So I hope secondarily, we're going to gain some skills about how we read the Bible well. All right, so we're going to turn to Genesis chapter 12. And if you're getting used to your Bible, this one's really easy. It's right near the beginning, 12 chapters in. Go ahead and turn there, and we're going to read all 9 verses together up front. So follow along, if you would, beginning at verse 1 of chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abram, this is Abraham, his name was changed partway through his story, so Abram becomes Abraham, okay? The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Okay, so a little bit of background. Abram is introduced at the very end of chapter 11. And we're shown that he's a part of a family, and his family has migrated from one place to another. And we're given a little bit of a family tree. And then boom, we hit here in chapter 12, and the Lord suddenly speaks to him. Now, what I want you to see out of these first few verses is here's the first thing about what we see take place in the story. God calls Abram and gives him a promise. God calls Abram and gives him a promise. Before that, we don't get any association between Abraham and God. They suddenly just seem to show up on the scene, and then God just steps in and speaks and says, here's what I'm going to do. Now, I just got to kind of tell you this, and Jake Herring, wherever you are, man, you'll be proud of me. I've got a couple of maps for y'all. And so here, we're going to see where did they come from. So Abram and his family, they started in a place called Ur. And you'll see on the very bottom right-hand side, your right-hand side, that little dot is where the city of Ur is thought to be. Now, there are some scholars, if you look at the top of the map, there's a little shaded gray area. They think there might have been a region called Ur, and it could have been there. I believe it's the south portion. I think that's where they started. They left from a city called Ur, and they migrated up to the land of Haran. That's the top of the map. That's the dot near the top. And so this is Abraham, his father, his family. This is where they come. And they've landed in Haran. Now, what I want you to know about this area is this area did not know God. They came from Ur. God's presence wasn't manifesting there in any particular way. And so we believe that there's no way that really, God had shown up in any particular way that the scripture doesn't tell us. So, they migrate, they move, and they go to Haran. They don't know who God is. But they land in that place. And we're told that he's got a family. He's married to a woman named Sarai. And he's got a nephew named Lot. This is his brother's son. His brother died. And so Lot is now relying upon the rest of the family to kind of carry on in life. And so he's present in the mix. God shows up and asks Abram in Haran, "Now I want you to leave again." And here's where they go on the next map. They leave Haran, and they go down to the land that God will show him. And so this is the journey that they took. Now, I want you to hear something. God told him, "Here, I want you to move. I want you to leave your people, your family, your country. You're going to pick up, relocate, and you're going to go somewhere that you don't know where it is. To the land I will show you." See, Abram doesn't know where they're going. God doesn't say, "Here's the destination." You're like, "Oh, yeah, I've been there. I know where that is." Okay, I'm good. No. Get up, start walking. Stop when I tell you. That's essentially what God has invited them to do. And he says, here's where I want you to go. And they follow this path, and eventually they land there. But God doesn't tell them on the front end. So what he does is he calls, but he also gives a promise. He's like, here's what I'm going to do. I will show you the land. When it's time, I will reveal this is where you're going, but I'm going to give you a family. I'm going to bless you. That family's going to become a nation. You're going to have an offspring that will multiply and become a great nation. And through you and through your offspring and through this nation, I'm going to bless. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless the peoples of the earth. I'm going to bring forth blessing, life, flourishing through you. You're going to have a family. You're going to have a great name. And all of this is going to come when I give you a land. So not only does God call Abram, but he gives him a promise. Here's what I'm going to do. And all of that is captured in these first few verses of chapter 12. But again, we don't think Abram knew God. Like, there's no evidence to say this. Like, okay, well, they've been doing this for a while. Like, he shows up and said, hey, trust me, go somewhere where you've never been before. So what is Abram going to do? Abram trusts God, and he goes, even though he doesn't have all the pieces figured out. I mean, this is how we're introduced to Abram, a man who suddenly encounters God, doesn't really know much about him, but receives a promise. And what does he do? It's like, okay, I'll trust you. And I'll go. I'll step forward and I'll move. I will relocate. I will leave what's familiar and go to what is unfamiliar. I'm going to trust that you are going to take me somewhere good. And so he goes. So the first thing that I want you to see about faith, right out of the gates as we're introduced to Abram, is that faith is active trust. It's active trust. We tend to think faith is just this thing that we have. What we see with Abram, what he's doing right here, is he's acting on his trust. It is not static. It is not set. It is not just this thing. It is dynamic. It moves us. It has energy. It causes us to move forward. It is active. Faith is not passive. It's not static, but it's active and dynamic. And it's trust. Anytime I see the word faith in the Bible, this is my most favorite synonym: trust. Faith is not just holding an idea in our minds, like, oh, I believe something to be true. Trust communicates relationship, communicates building on something. Trust. There's this relational dynamic, and that's what we see happening here, even though it's the beginning of the relationship. Abram is now in a connected relationship with God. Trust is a part of all of this. And so before we think faith is just something that we have, it's something that does something to us. And we move with it. Faith is active trust. We're going to come back to this over and over again as we go through his story. But there is something that needs to be named at this point. So if I am saying faith is active trust, then there's a necessary thing that we've got to identify as we walk through this story. Because if it's active trust, it's built on something. Well, what? The next thing I want you to see is that faith begins. It starts with listening to God's voice. This is really important. See, as we see the story play out up to this point, we've only seen 11 chapters so far. But this is a key theme in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. Let me just kind of quick retell the story. So at the very beginning, God created the world, created Adam and Eve, and he asks them to trust him. And the way he does that, it's like, hey, I've given you all of this. Here's a beautiful garden I've planted for you. Let's work it together. Let's take care of it. Let's help it flourish. But there's one tree. Don't eat of that. Would you trust me? Like, don't eat of this tree. look to me to give you what you're looking for, which ultimately is wisdom, how we live, how we understand what is right and good and what is wrong and bad. But there's a serpent that shows up. In chapter 3, he's talking to Adam and Eve here, and he says, hey, really, did God really say? And he's like, he's holding out on you. That tree that he told you not to eat from, it'll give you wisdom. It's the way to have what you're looking for. It's the way to good life. You shouldn't trust him. Take that fruit and figure it out on your own. And here we have competing voices. Who will they listen to? Well, you probably know the story. They ate the fruit. They chose this voice instead. They chose the voice of the serpent. They chose the way of self-sufficiency. It's like God's holding out on us. We got to depend on us, not on him. And that's how we figure out how to live. That's how we know what's wise and good. This is how we do it. We do it on our own strength. And the story shows us this is the wrong choice. See, they have to leave the garden. They've ruptured the relationship. And then their sons is carried on with, Cain and Abel. Cain is jealous of his brother. And God comes to him and says, Cain, sin is crouching at your door. It wants to devour you. Don't give in. Don't listen to that voice. You have a choice here. Cain, of course, gives in. He kills his brother Abel and devastates the family and causes a spiral over the next few chapters where human beings continue to kill one another. He listened to the voice of the serpent. But we see when we get to Noah, God's like, okay, this is not the way things are supposed to be. Like, I'm going to do something. Noah, I'm going to ask you to do something kind of crazy. Build a boat. And I'm going to rescue you through it. What does Noah do? He builds the boat. Listening to God's voice. He listens to what God asks him to do, and God rescues him through it. And here we see what Genesis is trying to show us. You listen to the voice of the serpent, and it's going to go poorly. But you listen to the voice of God, you will find life and flourishing. That is the theme carried forward till we get to Abram. And so God speaks. He shares his voice. What is Abram going to do? He listens to God's voice. He responds in obedience. He responds in trust and says, okay, I'll do what you tell me, God. And here, what Genesis is showing us is a choice. What voices are you going to listen to? Whom are you going to trust? Where are you going to place your trust? And that's the question I want to ask you. Where is your trust? What are you trusting in? Whose voice are you listening to? Now, before you think like, okay, listening to God's voice, that's like asking him for discernment on decisions I got to make, like what college should I go to and things like that. That's not what I mean. That is part of this, and that's a little bit of a sliver here. What I'm talking about is this larger thing. Who are we going to give priority to? What way are we going to follow? How are we going to organize and live our lives? By what voice? What way? What are we trusting in to get us to the good kind of life we're looking for? Is it God, or is it something else? What voice are you listening to? What are you trusting in? What kinds of things do you find yourself drawn towards like this? This is what I'm going to put my emphasis and priority on. Can you identify that? Like deep down in your heart of hearts, what are you trusting in? What voice are you listening to? What are you giving priority to in your life? You might know that. You might be very clear-eyed, like, yep, I know exactly what it is. And some of you are like, yeah, I know it's Jesus. Yeah, I got that. Let me push on that just a little bit. What would other people say you're listening to? If other people looked at your life, how you carry yourself, would they say you're listening to Jesus' voice first? Or are you listening to something else? Are you trusting in something else? What would other people say? Maybe you know what that would be. Maybe not. Do you have a set of people where, here, can I challenge you? Ask them. Invite that feedback, invite that accountability, and what would they tell you? Are you in a place where you can do that with a group of people? You might have the people in your life. You might automatically think, like, yeah, here's who I can ask. If you don't have that, build that kind of community. Because I'll tell you what, inevitably there's going to be things where we are not listening to God's voice first. And if we think that we've got it all figured out, we're lying to ourselves, we're deceiving ourselves. We still have areas where we can get better, where we can move into better faith, where we can listen to his voice first. This is not a one-time choice. This is a continual re-upping of a choice over and over and over again throughout our lives. So do you have people in your life where you can do that with? Are you clear-eyed about where your alignment or misalignment is to God's voice? What are you trusting in? What Genesis wants us to see, it's God's voice. It's his way. This is what it's challenging us to see. It's like it is in God that we find the things that we need, that we want, that we have our being. It's in him. That's what it wants us to see. So will we become aware of that? See where we're misaligned, see where we're not trusting in him, listening to his voice. Now, if I'm throwing this question out for you, I don't know if you kind of feel like, oh, this feels burdening, like challenging, like how can I do this? There's one more thing I need you to see that comes from the story of Abram. This thing called faith is not static. It's not stationary. It moves. What I want you to see is that faith is learned and grown. Over and over again, we see Abram succeed. He demonstrates faith. He shows like his obedience and trust in the Lord. And over again, he doesn't. We're going to see different stories where Abram falls short. We're going to see that next week. Like Abram steps up, he's like, yeah, I'll believe. And then the next thing he doesn't. And what we see in the whole journey of Abraham's story is that he grows in faith. Till we get to the end of his life where he is now set up as like, this is a guy we can learn from. And so what I want you to hear, what I want you to see is that faith, it does not have to stay in this one place. It can grow. It can progress. It becomes more as we walk with God. So faith is something that we can learn and grow in. And that's what we see with Abram's story. He learns and grows. His faith takes on new levels of depth and meaning. And so my charge to you today and for this whole series is this: cultivate your faith. Grow it, work it. Just like a farmer or a gardener is cultivating the soil, planting crops or flowers, like you invest in it, you put in seed, you put in fertilizer, you do things to help it grow. We can do the same thing with our faith. Now, before any of you might think like, okay, Brian, what are you talking about here? Faith is something that we have some responsibility towards, but it is not ultimately in our hands. When we talk about faith, it first and foremost is a gift from God. Saving faith, the kind of faith that changes our lives, ultimately comes from him. But as Philippians tells us, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Salvation is a gift, but it's something we participate in. So when we talk about faith, it is an act of God. But let me tell you, he is ready. He is right there with you. He has been working and setting all this up. He's waiting for you to step forward. So wherever you find these areas where you're like, am I where I need to be? Am I growing in faith the way that I need to? He's already ready, waiting, ready to move with you. And so if you feel like, oh man, I'm not where I should be, I've screwed up, or I'm not demonstrating my faith the way that I want, God cares way more about it than you do, and he wants to walk with you through it. So cultivate your faith. We do that by making Jesus priority. And if you've never done that, if you're not sure what you think about Jesus, that's okay because it's a journey. You're along the way, but he's offering you right now, would you listen to my voice first? Put me in the primary spot in your life. Will you turn to me and trust me first? That's the invitation. That's what he's putting before you right now. And you can choose today. All right, I want to begin to walk that road. If you're ready for that decision, come find me, come find a volunteer and express it to us, and we want to follow up and have a conversation and help show you what this all looks like. So if you're at that place where it's all right, I want to follow Jesus, I want to figure this thing out, let us walk with you. But for those of us who have made that choice, maybe we made it years and years ago, I can tell you what, we are not done yet. We have not arrived. It's not all clean and clear. We've still got things we need to learn and grow in. That is where Jesus wants to work. So we've got to become aware of it. Where are these growth edges for us? Can you name one? Can you pinpoint it, put your finger on it? If you need help, seek wise counsel from others. But if you can see it, that's where Jesus wants to work. That's where you can cultivate the soil. So we invite you to do that. Cultivate your faith, your trust, listening to his voice first. So bringing this all together for today. Here's what I want you to see about faith in step one. Faith is first listening to God's voice and growing in active trust. It starts with him. Putting him as number one. And growing in that active, obedient, moving kind of trust. That's what we see Abram do. He moved. He didn't have all the pieces figured out. He's trusting the one who called him. That's where faith begins. And so as we walk through this series, we're going to explore, what is faith all about? How do we begin to do this? What does it look like for us to encounter these different moments that we're going to have in our faith journey? Abram's going to give us a way, chart the course, help us see. So we invite you to be a part of this whole series as we go over this for the next 6-7 weeks. And we want you to see how beautiful and deep and rich faith is. But for today, faith is listening to God's voice and growing in active trust. Can we join together in prayer?